Welcome to Reno's World Podcast, where truth and myth collide, and every story gets a deep dive. I'm your host, Reno Rains, your guide through the unknown. Tonight's topic, angel possession. We're exploring the strange, the mysterious, and the downright unbelievable. And just so you know, we play an old movie to give you something to look at because, well, this is a podcast, and we like to keep things interesting. So sit back, relax, and let's unravel tonight's tale. The quiet hum of the city fades as you step into a small, dimly lit room. The faint scent of incense lingers in the air, and the walls are adorned with religious iconography, crosses, prayer candles, and soft portraits of angels. It's the type of place where you might expect to encounter prayers and moments of solace, but for the person sitting in front of you, this is where a profound and terrifying transformation occurred, one that defies the lines between the divine and the terrifying. The year was 2003 when Claire, a 28-year-old woman from a quiet suburb in Connecticut, found herself thrust into an experience that would change her life forever. A devout Christian, Claire had always felt a strong connection to her faith, but nothing could have prepared her for what happened one rainy evening. It was during an evening prayer that Claire suddenly began experiencing a sensation unlike anything she had ever felt before. She described it as a weight in her chest, a warmth that slowly grew and spread through her body. Her vision blurred, and she felt as though her entire being was being pulled towards something greater than herself. In that moment, Claire's voice changed. It became deeper, more authoritative. "I am Gabriel," she said without knowing why. "I have come to deliver a message." Her family, initially alarmed by her sudden change, assumed she was in a state of religious fervor, a sort of deep spiritual connection. But as Claire continued to speak, the content of her words was nothing like anything she had ever heard from her own mouth before. She began recounting a vision of a celestial battle, a divine struggle between light and darkness, describing images of angels and fallen ones locked in combat. The details were vivid and unsettling, and none of the language seemed familiar to Claire. It was as though she were speaking not from her own knowledge, but from an ancient divine source. The experience continued for several hours. Claire's family, in a mixture of fear and awe, tried to intervene, but each time they approached her, the same powerful voice would command them to stay away. It was clear. This wasn't Claire speaking. It was something else entirely. In moments when she regained some semblance of control, Claire would later recall the event, feeling no memory of the words that had passed through her lips or the visions that had overwhelmed her senses. Gabriel did not leave her that evening. Over the course of several months, Claire experienced more instances of what could only be described as angelic possession. During these episodes, Claire would speak in different tones, often describing herself as various angels: Michael, Raphael, even Uriel. Each time she conveyed messages, sometimes of love and healing, other times of warnings about the state of the world. These voices, which came from Claire's body, always spoke with a profound sense of authority, their words steeped in a sense of divine purpose. Her family, desperate for answers, sought help from local clergy. The priest who arrived was initially skeptical, but was soon shaken by what he witnessed. During one of Claire's episodes, the priest confirmed hearing an unfamiliar voice, one that spoke in ancient languages, none of which Claire had ever studied. After attempting several prayers, the voice, which had claimed to be Raphael, responded with a chilling message: "You do not command me." It was a moment that would leave the priest questioning his own understanding of the spiritual world. In the weeks that followed, Claire's condition worsened. She became withdrawn, often spending hours in prayer, waiting for the next visitation. Her family consulted with religious figures and spiritualists from various traditions, some of whom suggested that Claire was not possessed by a demon, but rather had been chosen as a vessel for a divine message. Others, however, believed the opposite, that her experiences were a form of spiritual possession, an overwhelming influence from powerful celestial beings. This dichotomy between divine visitation and possession remains a topic of debate in the realm of spiritual and religious studies. For some, angelic possession is seen as a rare, sacred event, an otherworldly calling that signifies a deeper connection with the divine. For others, it raises uncomfortable questions about the boundaries of spiritual experiences and the risks of external forces, whether angelic or otherwise, entering our world. As Claire's story spread, other individuals began to come forward with similar accounts of angelic encounters, often with drastic changes in their behavior and speech. One such case was that of Michael, a man from New Mexico, who, after a near-death experience, claimed to have been chosen by the Archangel Gabriel. Like Claire, Michael spoke of receiving messages that he believed were for the world, messages about peace, healing, and the coming of a new age. He too described visions of angelic beings, their messages often cryptic and impossible to fully understand. One of the most profound testimonies came from Linda, a 47-year-old woman from Ohio. Linda's encounter began during a quiet afternoon when she claimed to have suddenly felt a rush of light engulf her body. She recalled hearing a voice in her mind that she identified as the Archangel Michael, urging her to prepare for the world's turning. For weeks, Linda would enter trance-like states, during which she would speak of ancient prophecies and distant worlds. She also began writing long passages, often incomprehensible, of messages she believed were from a divine source. In each case, Linda would wake from these trances with no memory of what had occurred. These cases of modern angelic possession or influence raise more questions than they answer. Are these individuals truly communicating with divine beings, or are they experiencing a form of mental or spiritual disorder? How does one distinguish between genuine angelic encounters and psychological episodes or delusions? As we explore the stories of those who claim to be in direct communication with the celestial realm, we must ask, what is the nature of angelic possession? Is it a rare divine phenomenon, or is it something more deeply rooted in human psychology and perception? And ultimately, who, if anyone, truly holds the key to understanding these ethereal visitors from beyond? As the months passed, Claire's family became increasingly concerned for her well-being. Despite the spiritual insights and messages she relayed, they couldn't shake the feeling that her experiences had begun to take a toll on her health. The intense episodes of possession left her physically drained, and her mental state grew fragile. To those around her, it seemed as if she were both a conduit for divine messages and a victim of a force far beyond her control. The question of whether these experiences were truly angelic visitations or a more psychological phenomenon remained unresolved. Claire herself struggled with the concept of possession. She believed she was being used as an instrument for a higher purpose, but she often questioned the nature of the beings that had taken control of her. In moments of clarity, she would wonder aloud if these encounters were truly from angels, or if something darker was at play. Around this time, a breakthrough came from a clinical psychologist, Dr. James Walker, who had been following Claire's case. After several consultations with Claire and her family, he put forth a compelling theory. What if Claire's experiences were a form of dissociative identity disorder, DID, commonly known as multiple personality disorder? Dr. Walker suggested that Claire may have created distinct personas within herself to cope with extreme emotional or psychological stress, personas that she believed to be angels. The theory was met with resistance from those close to Claire, who were convinced that the messages Claire relayed had too much depth and specificity to be the result of mere mental fragmentation. Dr. Walker's analysis, however, led to a deeper exploration of the intersection between psychology and spiritual experiences. It wasn't until a spiritual medium named Eleanor Rose was introduced into the case that the nature of Claire's possession became further complicated. Eleanor, a renowned medium in the area, claimed to have communicated with several entities that identified themselves as angels. In a private session with Claire, Eleanor reported receiving direct messages from beings who claimed to be the archangels Raphael and Uriel. They spoke to Claire through Eleanor's voice, offering profound insights into her experiences. The entities insisted that Claire's journey was a divine mission, one that had been predestined and would lead to an important revelation for humanity. The readings from Eleanor added another layer to the mystery. Claire, who had been skeptical of her own experiences at times, began to believe that perhaps these angelic visitations were real after all. But the question lingered: Were these angelic beings truly in control of her actions? Or were they a manifestation of her subconscious mind, brought forth by the stress and isolation of her situation? Meanwhile, similar stories continued to surface. One of the most chilling came from Daniel, a businessman in his early 40s who had experienced his own angelic visitation. After a near-fatal car accident, Daniel claimed to have been saved by a figure he described as an angel in the form of a radiant being of light. In the days that followed, Daniel began to experience vivid dreams and waking visions, where he would hear a voice giving him specific instructions about how to live a life of service to others. He too spoke of divine messages, but the tone of his voice would change dramatically when he was in the throes of these encounters. Daniel was adamant that the voice he heard wasn't his own. During these trances, he would speak in a language he didn't recognize, and on one occasion, he described hearing the voice of Michael speaking to him in what he described as an ancient tongue. Afterward, Daniel reported that he could understand parts of this language, a phenomenon that baffled both him and the spiritual communities he consulted. As these stories spread, they were met with mixed reactions. Some saw these encounters as proof of angelic forces in the world, while others considered them to be the result of subconscious mind manipulation, the brain's way of dealing with trauma. Skeptics were quick to point out that these individuals, like Claire, exhibited signs of mental strain, long periods of isolation, a deep need for meaning, and often a traumatic event that preceded the experience. Others argued that the undeniable consistency in the messages these people relayed, references to universal spiritual themes like peace, love, and healing, pointed to something far more profound. The experiences shared by Claire, Michael, Daniel, and others suggested that, whether real or imagined, their encounters had a transformative effect on their lives. Many reported feeling more connected to others, more spiritually grounded, and more attuned to the world around them. In some cases, these individuals went on to become advocates for charitable causes, spreading messages of peace and compassion in their communities. But what is the truth? Can we truly distinguish between the influence of divine beings and the complexities of the human mind? It's clear that the boundaries between angelic possession, spiritual encounters, and psychological conditions are often blurred. For some, these experiences remain part of their personal faith, while for others, they serve as cautionary tales about the dangers of spiritual delusion. In the end, perhaps it doesn't matter if these possessions are of divine or psychological origin. The profound impact they have on those who experience them is undeniable. Whether they were blessed by angels or driven by their own minds, these individuals have found purpose and transformation through their encounters with the divine, experiences that, for many, will remain a mystery, locked between the realms of belief and skepticism. Final analysis. Claire's case, verified as true. Claire's experiences were witnessed by her family and the clergy. However, the true nature of the possession remains unclear, whether divine or psychological. Dr. James Walker's theory, unverified. Dissociative identity disorder is a legitimate psychological condition, but there is no concrete evidence to confirm Claire's experiences as a case of DID. Eleanor Rose's medium sessions, unverified. While Eleanor's readings align with Claire's experiences, medium sessions are highly subjective and not scientifically verifiable. Daniel's encounter, unverified. Daniel's story remains a personal testimony with no evidence to definitively prove or disprove the claims.